He was naked except for the steam that curled around his shoulders, a god reduced to breath and sweat. Somewhere beyond the marble, Rome howled in celebration of another festival invented to glorify his name. But inside the imperial bathhouse, only the water spoke, lapping softly as if afraid to interrupt. The ritual. Commodus eased deeper into the pool, fingers tracing the veins of green stone as though it were the pulse of the world he owned. In the torch-blown shadows, a single figure waited. Narcissus, the champion wrestler, muscles coiled like ropes left too long in the rain. The emperor looked. Up smiled the lazy smile of a lion, too certain of its own legend, and did not notice the thin leather cord glimmering behind the assassin's fist. A heartbeat later, the air quivered with the quietest of whiplash cracks. The world would learn at dawn that a man who believed himself Hercules had died with nothing but bathwater in his lungs. And yet before cartilage gave way and eyes burst red beneath the pressure, there was a lifetime of prophecy written in blood and applause. You deserve to see it because myths do not come fully grown. They gestate in childhood, fed by whispers, sharpened by fear, and so we rewind the reel. Commodus flares backward through memory skin, reforms over his face. The ligature loosens, steam becomes the breath of a stadium, and we arrive at the boy prince wrapped in purple so heavy it dragged his shoulders forward before manhood ever had a chance to. Marcus Aurelius inspected his newborn twin, counted fingers, and wondered whether a Roman emperor could inherit not just land, but restlessness. The philosophers called the infant Lucius Aurelius Commodus a blank tablet. The midwives whispered darker predictions, noticing how the boy tightened his fists when lullabies faded. He learned to walk beneath a war tent beside the Danube, where his father chased barbarians and every footfall thumped in time with drums of conquest. Tutors read him Homer, but he preferred stories where heroes survived by sheer muscle, not cunning. By 9, he watched animal hunts from the imperial box. When the tiger's throat sprayed the sand, his laughter outsang the crowd. Power came early, and so did the first taste of being worshipped. Senators bowed too low, slaves risked lashes to meet his gaze, and marble statues sprouted across the empire, bearing his infant features, fat cheeks carved in stone, to remind legions whom they served. Children typically outgrow their fantasies. Commodus never had to. When he paraded in miniature armor, real soldiers saluted. The boundary between play acting and destiny dissolved like sugar and wine, sweet, invisible, lethal. But Rome is generous only to those who remain entertaining. Before long, the boy felt the itch to perform for real. He practiced with wooden swords in corridors lined with busts of dead rulers, slashing each marble nose as if amputating history itself. Trainers gasped at his speed. Marcus Aurelius sighed at his vanity. Philosophy, the old emperor whispered, was the only shield that never cracks. Commodus heard merely an inscription on a tomb he had no intention of joining. When his father died in the Danube mud, the son rode back to the capital not as heir, but as incarnate divinity. He promised bread games and glory. Bread spoiled, games multiplied, glory curdled into spectacle. The Colosseum hissed with 60,000 lungs when Commodus first strode onto the sand, dressed as Hercules' reborn lion-skin cowl-knotted club, the grin of someone who confuses applause with affection. He swung at ostriches until heads bounced like dice, decapitated a panther to the roar of flutes, and then, most shocking, fought human gladiators ordered to lose or die for real. They lost. He killed. Each victory confirmed a narcotic thesis that godhood can be proven by body count. Spectators cheered louder because terror is contagious, and senators kept silent because coffins were cheaper than courage. Yet terror planted seeds of conspiracy. Every garish kill splashed new resentment onto marble steps already slick with it. Night after night, he returned to the palace, drunk on chants of Dominus Deus Gladiator. He rechristened the months after. Himself renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana, scorched the empire's treasury to fund gold-spangled arrows for display kills no one could remember by morning. What citizens did remember were taxes gnawing at their bread plagues, coughing through alleys, and an emperor who treated the Senate like it was just another arena. Letters of protest earned their authors exile. Sighs earned whips. Yet one element still held Commodus's trust, the small circle of favorites who poured his wine, warmed his bath, and knew exactly how long to praise without trembling. Among them glimmered Marcia, the mistress whose voice could calm migraines and Latus, commander of the Praetorians whose loyalty was measured by coin rather than oath. They watched decadence slither into madness until it threatened to devour them too. A winter dusk bled across December 31st, 192 CE. Commodus announced that at the New Year's Games he would stride naked but for a lion pelt slay 100 gladiators and then anoint himself consul in the arena, abolishing the last pretense that Rome was anything but the stage of his ego. Marcia begged him to reconsider. He replied by listing the names of men he planned to execute at the celebration. Hers included, fear makes swift conspirators. That night she slipped poison into his wine, but the emperor's stomach, hardened by years of exotic feasts, rebelled, and he vomited the death back up. Vomited, but did not live. Latus summoned Narcissus the wrestler whose arms were reputed to bend iron. The plan was simple: make the gods mortal. Commodus stumbled toward his bathhouse, swearing to purge the poison with steam. Marble lions watched as he disrobed their stone mouths, frozen mid-snarl, like critics too frightened to boo. Water swallowed him, waist-deep warmth fogged the mirrors, and history slowed to the hush of an executioner's footfall. Narcissus emerged from behind a pillar, eyes reflecting torch fire and pity. The emperor blinked, irritation flickering. He had not ordered entertainment. Pity hardened into resolve. The cord slid around Commodus's neck, tightened as muscles he once flexed for cheers now bulged in panic. He clawed, thrashed, kicked the pool into froth, but a gladiator who rigged every match had never learned how to survive one he could lose. Seconds stretched to eternities. Then the struggle ceased. Narcissus held the limp body until bubbles stopped. News galloped across Rome before sunrise, a god drowned on dry marble. Crowds that once screamed adoration now muttered relief. Senators dragged the corpse through hurried funeral rites, eager to pretend it had all been an unfortunate accident of indigestion. Yet even as his body cooled, statues of Commodus still loomed over forums, daring passers-by to forget him. They would try. Civil war would answer. Plague would return. Empires like men eventually suffocate on grandeur. But you watching from centuries away can still hear the echo of a single choke in a tiled chamber. It asks a question we rarely voice: what is leadership? When stripped of myth, Commodus believed heroism could be purchased with screams. His death demonstrates a quieter arithmetic: vanity plus power equals loneliness, and loneliness when cornered strangles itself. Somewhere beneath modern city lights, the foundations of that bathhouse remain stones stained not by physical blood, but by the memory of an ego so swollen it burst. If you lean close, you might hear water dripping where an emperor once gasped for air, and realize that every leader who dreams he is legend risks waking up to find the world has already closed its fists around his throat. Part 2. They called him the new Hercules. Not in jest, not in sarcasm, but in chilling reverence. Rome had seen madness before: emperors who burned cities, who married their horses, who plucked eyes from statues, but Commodus fought, not from a throne, not in books, but with sword sweat and staged blood in the Colosseum. It began as a performance, a novelty, a boy born in silk stepping into the dust. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or kneel, but Commodus didn't blink. His first match was against a man chained at the ankle, half-starved. The emperor circled like a child playing with his food. When he struck, it was not efficient, it was theatrical. He carved the man not to kill, but to paint the arena red. The audience was silent. Then they cheered. And that was all Commodus needed. Applause was confirmation. The empire was now his stage, he declared. Himself the 13th incarnation of Hercules. Commissioned statues showing himself in lion skins. Demanded to be addressed not as Caesar, but as the champion of Rome. He renamed every month in the calendar after himself. Declared the city of Rome itself, Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. Citizens laughed quietly, then cautiously, then not at all. The Senate, already stripped of dignity, became his prop. He made them clap during his victories in the arena, forced them to attend games where he fought crippled opponents, and once demanded they sit through a full hour of him slaughtering giraffes just to showcase his aim. Behold the emperor, he would cry, more precise than Apollo, more divine than Jupiter. Those who did not laugh loud enough found themselves exiled, or worse. But every madman has a mirror. For Commodus, that mirror was Marcia. She had been his mistress, his confidant, the quiet voice that lingered after the blood dried. Marcia saw the boy beneath the god, knew how he dreamed not of governance, but of adoration. She watched as his paranoia deepened, fed by dreams and drugs. He believed the gods whispered to him, that the Senate plotted against him, that Rome would betray him the way Brutus betrayed Caesar. The palace became a prison of velvet and incense. He refused to eat unless slaves tasted first. He banished philosophers who spoke of moderation. He trusted only gladiators and wrestlers, men whose loyalty was paid in coin and whose answers came without metaphor. And yet for all his power, he was still afraid of being forgotten. So he doubled down, declared he would fight 1,000 matches, staged executions disguised as games, killed so many beasts that North African hunting reserves began to empty. The treasury bled to fund his spectacles. Grain prices soared, cities rioted. But Commodus smiled. They do not need bread, he said once, only a god to cheer. The empire groaned under the weight of his fantasies. But no one dared move, except Latus, Quintus Aemilius. Latus, commander of the Praetorian Guard, had once sworn to protect the emperor with his life. But Latus was no fool. He saw the winds turning, felt the chill in the marble halls. Senators whispered of rebellion. Generals delayed their reports. And worse rumors spread that Commodus intended to disband the Senate altogether and rule solely through the arena. Latus knew that empires collapsed not in war, but in whispers. So he whispered back. He met with Marcia. With Eclectus, the chamberlain, they formed a plan. Poison first, quick, clean, private. But fate, as always in Rome, had other ideas. December 31st, 192 CE, Commodus bloated with wine. And Delusion had just ordered a list of executions, his own mistress, his own guard, his own staff. The message was clear, trust was a costume, and he was ready to tear it. Marcia panicked. She poured poison into his evening wine. He drank, laughed, vomited, survived. And then the knife edge of panic, what now? Latus did not hesitate. He summoned Narcissus. Narcissus, the wrestler, a man of few words, fewer doubts. Once a champion of the arena, now a tool of fate. He knew what he was asked to do. He did not flinch. And while the imperial bath steamed quietly in the night, history set its final scene. Commodus, weakened but arrogant, retreated into the bath to soothe the sickness. He dismissed his guards, trusted the silence, trusted the routine. As he closed his eyes, Narcissus crept from the shadows. No trumpets, no proclamations, just the hiss of water and the snap of a cord. He fought. Oh, he fought. But the cord was faster than any lion, stronger than any applause. Rome exhaled. The emperor was dead, but his madness wasn't. Because when the gods fall, the myths linger. And the question was no longer what did he do, but why did Rome allow it for so long, and worse? Who might come next? Part 3, his corpse was still warm when the knives came out, not the literal ones, but sharper. Still speeches, decrees, edits to history. Commodus was declared a public enemy by the very Senate that once called him divine. Statues were torn down. Coins were melted. His name was erased from temples as if oblivion could cleanse the stench of what he'd done. But Rome couldn't forget, because Commodus hadn't just ruled, he had infected. And before he was strangled in steam, the rot had already taken root. In the last year of his life, Commodus no longer governed, he performed. Rome became his audience, and like all audiences, it was trapped between boredom and fear. He would enter the arena not just in costume, but in full delusion, announcing himself as Hercules, reincarnated god of gods, lord of life and death. When he killed, he screamed his titles. When he missed a strike, the opponent died anyway by decree. He once beheaded a man in the arena, then ordered the body nailed upright in the forum as a warning to those who frown during sport. He painted the Colosseum crimson, then demanded roses be thrown from rooftops every time he raised his hand. But what haunts most was not his violence, it was how normalized it became. The Senate, once the spine of Roman governance, folded like parchment. Senators who once debated Cicero now choreographed applause. They wore gold togas when he fought. They kissed his feet when he passed. Dissent had become a death sentence. Only a few dared to speak up. One, a Stoic philosopher named Attalus, wrote a scroll calling Commodus a barking fool, in a lion's skin. He disappeared the next morning. His scrolls were burned. His house was turned into stables. By then, even the gods seemed to look away. Plagues returned. Crops failed. Earthquakes shook the hills. People began to whisper that Rome had angered the heavens, that it was being punished not by barbarians but by its own emperor. And yet, even as the empire cracked, Commodus believed himself eternal. He commissioned a golden colossus of himself, taller than any temple. He wanted his face stamped on every doorframe in the empire. He planned to rename the oceans. But paranoia is the shadow of power. He stopped trusting letters. He stopped trusting light. He dined alone, even among guests. He poisoned his own wine to test it. He accused birds of spying. He slept surrounded by armed guards, and even they were not safe from his suspicion. Those once closest to him began to vanish, one by one, executed, banished, discredited. Even Marcia, his mistress, his confidant, began to understand she was not loved. She was tolerated, a vase on a shelf that might be smashed when his mood shifted. The final spiral came when Commodus declared that, for the upcoming year, he would not appoint new consuls. Instead, he himself would serve as sole consul, not once, but every month. 12 months, 12 consulates, all Commodus. He would fight each month in the arena to bless Rome with blood and renewal. He would end the year by crowning himself high priest of a new cult, dedicated entirely to himself. That was the tipping point. The Praetorian Guard, the same body sworn to protect him, began to waver, not from loyalty but from calculation. Their leader Latus did the math. An empire ruled by madness could not pay its soldiers forever, and a dead emperor cannot issue executions. He visited Marcia in the quiet of night, spoke no words, simply showed her a scroll, her name listed fourth on a death order. The silence between them said everything. That night they tried poison, but poison, like gods, doesn't always behave. Commodus vomited it back into his own bathwater, and for one trembling hour the future of Rome sat in limbo between a failed murder and a returning madman. It was Latus who acted. He summoned Narcissus, the former champion, now reduced to body servant. He gave him one order: no witnesses, no delay, no mercy. The wrestler nodded. That was the last command Commodus would ever give or disobey. And yet, for all the noise he made in life, Commodus died in the quiet, not on the battlefield, not on a throne, but half-naked, slipping beneath. Water thick with oil and bile, killed not by war or politics, but by the hands of a man who used to clean his towels. The bathhouse echoed with a single splash. History did not weep. It exhaled. Part 4. The moment Commodus died, the silence was not relief. It was tension snapping. His body lay slumped against the marble, head-tilted, eyes still open. A smear of blood trailed down the side of the bath, mingling with scented oils once meant to honor gods. Narcissus stepped back, breathing hard, fists clenched, not in triumph, but in horror. He hadn't just killed an emperor, he had strangled a storm. The conspirators stood outside the bathhouse, waiting not with joy, but with dread. Marcia trembled. Latus crossed his arms, lips pressed thin. They had removed a tyrant, but what would rise from the ashes? Rome was not a city. That forgave power vacuums. It was a city that devoured them. Word spread at dawn, not shouted, not announced, leaked. The emperor was dead, murdered, found in his own bath. For a few heartbeats, the people were stunned. Then they cheered, quietly, behind doors, then louder, on the streets, then violently in the Senate. Because Commodus had not just ruled with violence, he had made a spectacle of power, and now that curtain had finally fallen. The Senate moved fast. Commodus was declared a public enemy, his laws revoked, his images smashed. His name, once sung in temples, was banned from public speech. It was as though Rome had been holding its breath for years and now finally dared to exhale. But beneath that breath was fear, because the death of Commodus solved one problem and unleashed 1,000. Who would rule the conspirators had no clear answer. Latus pushed for a noble senator named Pertinax, a man of discipline, of order, of age. But age in Rome was not an asset, it was a countdown. The army didn't love Pertinax. The people barely knew him. And power once shaken rarely settles where you plan. Pertinax would last. Just 86 days before being murdered by the very guards who had once obeyed Commodus. After him came auctioned emperors, blood for hire, chaos in a golden robe. But even before the next tyrant took the stage, there was one final act left in Commodus's story, his funeral. It was hurried. No golden chariot, no triumphal procession, just a plain bier carried at night torches sputtering in the wind, the smell of burnt incense mixing with the cold. His body was cremated without ceremony, and his ashes stored without prayer. No crowds, no songs. The man, who once renamed the months after himself, now had no name at all. But power does not die with the man. It lingers like smoke, like a curse. Even as his statues fell, rumors rose. Some claimed Commodus still breathed hidden by loyalists. Others swore he would return. As a god, some painted his face on walls in secret, worshiping the chaos he brought. Because chaos, no matter how cruel, can be seductive. It makes the world feel alive. And those left behind had to reckon with that truth. The senators who clapped when he killed. The guards, who stayed silent. The citizens who cheered blood because it was simpler than thinking. Rome was not innocent. Commodus was not an accident. He was a mirror. And in that mirror, the empire saw its worst self, greedy, violent, proud. The man died. The myth festered. But what? Of the assassin Narcissus, the hand of fate was executed shortly after the deed. No reward, no honor, just silence. He had been useful, then dangerous. Rome had no space for men who reminded of its own crimes. As for Marcia, she lived a little longer, enough to see. Pertinax fell, enough to see her name buried with the rest. History forgot her softly, like a door closed gently, but never reopened. Latus, the mastermind, was torn apart by a mob of his own soldiers, less than a year after he saved them. Because Rome, like its emperors, devours what it fears. So the story ends not with a hero, but a question. What happens when a god dies? But the hunger for gods remains. Commodus left behind no heirs, no legacies of policy, no scrolls of wisdom, only echoes. A bathhouse, a broken mirror, a dead emperor whose life was a stage, and a city still addicted to the show. The water had gone still. The emperor was ash. But Rome remained wide awake, as if expecting an encore from a play that had ended in blood. Outside the palace, the air was thick with rumors. In taverns and temples, men whispered that Commodus had died with dignity, that his enemies had feared his divine power and struck before he could ascend. Others scoffed, claiming he died whimpering like a child. No one knew the truth. Everyone had a version, and in that confusion, something darker began to ferment: nostalgia. Because Rome was not grieving a man. It was grieving a myth it had allowed to grow, then kill. In the days that followed, the streets of the capital changed. The arena games were paused. The statues melted. But beneath the surface, nothing had truly shifted. The same senators who had once praised Commodus now wrote speeches condemning him. The same generals who'd watched his decline now claimed they had always planned his removal. Cowardice dressed as wisdom. And in the shadow of all this, the people waited for a new emperor, a new god, a new lie to believe in. Pertinax came. He tried to restore order, cut salaries, tighten laws, restore dignity to the empire. He lasted less than 3 months. The Praetorian Guard, the very body that had killed Commodus, killed Pertinax too over a pay dispute. They then sold the throne to the highest bidder, a senator named Didius Julianus. He bid 25,000 sesterces per soldier. The gods did not weep. Rome laughed and bled. This was the world Commodus left behind, one where the emperor was not a leader but a purchase, where power had no soul, only price. And yet from the ruins of this farce, something strange began to happen. In remote provinces, soldiers began whispering not about vengeance or gold, but about memory, because Commodus had made himself unforgettable. Not in the way philosophers are, in the way disasters are. His name, though, banned.